Hey everyone, and welcome to our deep dive. It's some really, really big questions.
Oh, yeah.
We're going deep with making sense. Conversations on consciousness, morality, and the future of humanity by Sam Harris.
Fantastic book.
It's a collection of conversations from his podcast
Yeah.
with, some of the most interesting thinkers out there.
Oh, yeah. Some of the best.
So we're going to be talking about consciousness, AI, the nature of knowledge. I mean, buckle up. This is going to be a wild ride.
It really is. It's like we get to eavesdrop on these incredible dinner party conversations about the universe and everything.
Exactly. So to kick things off, let's dive right into one of the biggest questions out there. What is consciousness?
Right.
Could we ever build a machine that actually, experiences consciousness? Harris starts the book strong with a conversation with David Chalmers.
Oh, Chalmers.
And he introduces this idea of the hard problem of consciousness.
Yeah, the hard problem, the classic question. How does subjective experience, what it feels like to be us arise from physical matter?
Right? It's like we can map the brain.
Yeah.
We can see neurons firing.
Yeah.
But how does that create the feeling of experiencing the world, of being a self?
Yeah, yeah. It's almost like trying to explain what the color blue looks like to someone who's been blind from birth.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then it gets even weirder when you bring AI into the mix.
Oh, yeah.
We've got the Turing test, which is supposed to see if a machine can act just like a human.
Right. Can we tell the difference?
But even if a machine passes the Turing test,
Mm-hmm.
does that mean it's actually conscious?
That's the million-dollar question. I mean, I think what we can take away from all this is that we could be about to create AI that's smarter than us in every way,
Right.
but we might never actually know if it's really experiencing anything.
Yeah. Okay. That's already blowing my mind.
Mm-hmm.
So let's shift gears for a second and talk about knowledge itself.
Okay.
Harris has a fascinating conversation with the physicist David Deutsch.
Love Deutsch.
And Deutsch has this radical idea that knowledge isn't just something we have, in our heads.
Uh-huh.
He calls it information that tends to stay physically instantiated.
Yeah.
So it's not just in our minds.
Mm-hmm.
It's in books, in genes, maybe even in the structure of the universe itself.
Right. So this is the idea that knowledge kind of exists out there independently of us almost.
Right.
And that leads to his even more mind-bending argument for what he calls the universality of computation.
Okay.
Basically, he's saying that any physical process, in theory, could be simulated on a computer.
Hold on. So you're telling me we could simulate, like, the birth of a star
Yeah.
or the evolution of life on Earth?
In theory,
Yes.
on a computer.
Exactly. And the fascinating implication of that is that the limits of knowledge may not be set by the universe itself,
Wow.
but by how creative we can be with using computers to unlock that knowledge.
So knowledge is basically unlimited. We
Yeah.
just have to figure out how to access it. That's incredibly empowering.
It is.
It is.
Yeah.
But that also makes you wonder, where does humanity fit into all of this? I mean, we're
Right.
just this tiny little speck in this vast universe.
Does our knowledge even matter in the grand scheme of things?
Well, Deutsch would actually push back against that idea that humans are insignificant.
Okay.
He argues that we are central to understanding the universe
Okay.
because we're the ones asking the questions, seeking knowledge,
Right.
trying to explain things. It's like that old question, if a tree falls in the forest.
Does it make a sound?
Exactly. If no one's around to observe the universe or try to understand it,
Yeah.
does it even have meaning? We might be limited in our understanding right now,
Right.
but our impact on the universe is potentially massive.
Yeah.
We're far from insignificant.
I'm starting to see the universe in a whole new way now.
It's pretty amazing.
It is.
Yeah.
But even if knowledge is this vast, almost infinite thing,
Yeah.
Deutsch also brings up this idea of gaps between what's knowable
Okay.
and what we can actually achieve.
Right. There are things we can know but might not be able to do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He uses this thought experiment.
Yeah.
Imagine we're stuck on a deserted island
Okay.
and someone needs an appendectomy.
Oh, dear.
Even if we had all the medical knowledge in the world, if
Yeah.
we don't have the right tools and the right environment,
Mm-hmm.
that knowledge doesn't help us.
It's true. It's like having the recipe for a 5-star meal but no kitchen to cook in.
Exactly.
Hmm.
So even with knowledge, our ability to act on it depends completely on our circumstances.
Yeah. It's humbling.
It is humbling. The main takeaway here, I think,
Mm-hmm.
is that even with all the knowledge in the universe,
Yeah.
there may be limits to what we can achieve just because of the constraints of reality.
I think that's right.
And this whole discussion about the limits of knowledge makes me think about another big question that humans have always struggled with.
Mm.
The existence of God.
Right.
There's this classic argument called the ontological argument that tries to use the idea of perfection to prove that God exists.
So it's like saying because we can imagine a perfect being, that perfect being must exist somewhere.
Right. But Deutsch points out that this argument relies on assumptions that can't really be proven.
Yeah.
And it doesn't actually explain anything.
Right. It's more of a word game than a true explanation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, not a very convincing argument in the end.
Well, it's fun to think about.
Yeah, it is. But the real takeaway here is that any argument for the existence of anything needs to actually explain something.
Yeah, it has to have explanatory power.
I need a minute to process all of that. So we've got the mystery of consciousness, the vastness of knowledge, and now the age-old question of God.
Right.
This deep dive is really getting my brain working overtime.
It is a lot.
And it makes me wonder, are there just some things about the universe that we're not capable of understanding? Is there like a limit to human intelligence?
That's getting into the idea of cognitive closure.
Okay.
The idea that there might be some ultimate truths out there that are just beyond our grasp.
So no matter how smart we get,
Yeah,
there will always be mysteries that remain unsolved.
it's possible.
I don't know if I find that comforting or terrifying.
It's a bit of both, probably.
It is. But here's the thing. Deutsch doesn't buy into this idea of cognitive closure either.
Oh, really?
He argues that based on the universality of computation, there's no inherent limit to what we can understand.
So it's not that we can't understand.
Right.
It's that we haven't figured it out yet.
Exactly. Our only limitations are our current knowledge and the tools we have to explore the universe.
So we just need better tools,
Yeah.
better ways of thinking.
Yeah. It's not about hitting a wall. It's about needing to build a bigger ladder, so to speak.
I like that. A bigger ladder to knowledge.
Exactly. So the key takeaway is that the universe is knowable in principle. It's up to us to figure out how to unlock its secrets.
I love that perspective.
Yeah, it's a much more optimistic way of looking at things. And it leads us perfectly into our next topic, artificial general intelligence, or AGI.
Ah, AGI, the big one.
Right. I mean, this is the stuff of science fiction,
Yeah,
but it's becoming more and more relevant as technology advances.
it's true.
Even people like Stephen Hawking and Elon Musk have warned us about the dangers of creating AI that's actually smarter than humans.
Yeah, the idea of an intelligence explosion where machines just completely outpace us is definitely unsettling.
It is.
Yeah.
But, given Deutsch's optimistic view of our ability to understand computation, I'm curious what he thinks about the risk of AGI.
Well, he's actually more optimistic about it than you might think.
Okay.
He believes that AGI might not be so dangerous if we approach its development very carefully
Right.
and make sure that the goals of AI are aligned with human goals.
So it's all about building in safeguards from the beginning.
Exactly. Making sure that AI shares our values.
Right. So the main point here is that developing AGI requires us to be really cautious about the risks.
Yeah.
And to focus on building AI that's aligned with what we want as humans.
Aligned with our goals and values.
So much to think about there. It seems like every answer just leads to more questions.
That's the beauty of it.
It is. It really is.
That's so.
But that's what makes these conversations so fascinating.
Totally.
And that brings us to another big one. Ethics.
Ethics, oh boy.
Is there such a thing as objective morality? Or is it all just, subjective preferences?
Yeah, is it all relative?
This is where the concept of moral realism comes in.
Okay.
Is the idea that there are objective moral truths that exist regardless of what any individual or any culture believes.
So there's a right and wrong independent of our opinions.
Right. But how do we even figure out what those objective truths are?
Yeah, good question.
Some people argue that science can't tell us what we should do,
Right.
only what is.
Yeah, you can't derive an ought from an is, as they say.
Exactly. But Deutsch, for example, argues that we can ground moral reasoning in facts about human well-being.
Okay.
We can objectively observe whether certain actions or systems actually lead to human flourishing or to suffering.
So there are better and worse ways to live, and we can figure that out through observation and reason.
Exactly. So the takeaway here is that moral realism suggests that there are objectively better and worse ways to live.
Wow.
And understanding those truths is absolutely crucial for navigating the ethical challenges that we face.
It's not just a matter of opinion.
Exactly. I'm starting to see how all these ideas are connected. We're talking about knowledge, consciousness, ethics.
It's all intertwined.
And it all points back to this question of what it means to be human in a universe that's way stranger and more complex than we usually realize.
It's like we're on this amazing journey of exploration.
Speaking of exploration, let's zoom out for a second and consider another mind-boggling mystery. The Fermi paradox.
The Fermi paradox, always a good one.
Why haven't we found any evidence of alien civilizations yet?
Right. It's a huge universe.
I mean, given the vastness of the universe and how old it is,
Yeah.
it seems like we should have stumbled across something by now.
Statistically, it seems impossible that we're alone.
Right. It's a question that's puzzled scientists and sci-fi fans for decades.
It really has.
One possible solution is something called the Great Filter hypothesis,
Okay, the Great Filter.
which suggests that there might be some obstacle out there that prevents most civilizations from reaching a certain level of technological advancement.
Like a cosmic roadblock that most civilizations hit and never get past.
Exactly. Maybe it's something like, a resource limitation or some kind of self-destructive technology.
Oh, like we create AI that wipes us out.
Right. Or maybe it's something we haven't even thought of yet.
Something completely beyond our comprehension.
But Deutsch actually offers a different perspective.
Oh, really?
He suggests that a more plausible explanation might be that most civilizations just settle into a state of staticity.
Staticity, what does that mean?
It means they stop exploring and expanding.
So they just kind of get comfortable and stop pushing the boundary?
Exactly.
Yeah?
Like hitting the cosmic snooze button.
Wow, I've never thought of it that way. That's really interesting.
It is. It makes you wonder, what would it take for humanity to reach that point?
Right. Would we ever just stop being curious?
And would it be a good thing or a bad thing?
That's a tough one.
It is. The Fermi paradox is this unsolved mystery
Yeah.
that makes us really think about the challenges and the risks that come with technological advancement.
It's a good reminder that we're still at the very beginning of our journey of understanding the universe and our place in it.
Okay, well, that was a whirlwind tour of some seriously mind-bending ideas. I feel like my brain needs a break.
We covered a lot of ground.
We did. We explored the mysteries of consciousness, the vastness of knowledge, the nature of God, and the potential of AI.
And we did it all through the lens of these amazing conversations that Sam Harris has with brilliant thinkers.
Exactly. But we've only scratched the surface.
There's so much more to uncover in making sense.
We'll be back with even more mind-blowing insights in the next part of our deep dive, so stay tuned.
Can't wait. Welcome back to our deep dive into making sense.
It feels like we've been on this intellectual marathon,
Yeah.
and we're just getting started.
We are. We're just getting warmed up.
In the last part, we were talking about the Fermi paradox.
Right. All those big questions about...
Yeah, humanity's journey in understanding the universe and our place in it.
Absolutely.
It got me thinking about how our brains even make sense of the world.
Right.
Which actually leads us perfectly into this discussion in the book about how easily our minds can trick us.
Oh, totally. Our thinking is full of these hidden biases that we don't even realize are there.
Yeah, it's kind of freaky when you think about it.
It is. And Harris has this great conversation with Daniel Kahneman, who won the Nobel Prize in economics.
I love Kahneman.
Oh, it's brilliant.
He's the one who popularized the idea of System 1 and System 2 thinking, right?
Exactly. System 1 is that fast, intuitive thinking we do.
Yeah.
Relies on shortcuts and rules of thumb. Great for everyday decisions, but also prone to errors.
Yeah, System 2 is slower.
Yeah.
More deliberate.
Much more effortful.
But we tend to only use it when we absolutely have to.
Yeah. It's like System 1 is driving the car most of the time. And System 2 is the sleepy passenger in the back seat who only wakes up when there's about to be a crash.
And those crashes are like the cognitive biases that can lead us to make really irrational decisions.
And it's kind of humbling to realize that even the smartest people are susceptible to these mental traps.
We're all human.
We are.
It makes you wonder how much control we actually have over our own thinking.
It's a great question. And it leads us into another really crucial topic, the fragility of democratic institutions.
Yeah.
Harris dives into this with a conversation with Timothy Snyder.
Oh, Snyder's work is so important.
He's a historian who's really studied, the rise and fall of democracies.
Yeah, his book on tyranny is a must-read.
It is.
He warns about how easily democracies can crumble.
Yeah.
Especially when people lose faith in institutions or become disillusioned.
And one of his biggest warnings is about the danger of what he calls the renunciation of reality.
Okay.
Where people get so caught up in ideology or propaganda that they lose touch with the facts.
It's like falling down the rabbit hole of misinformation.
It is. It's like getting stuck in an echo chamber.
And once you're in that echo chamber, it's hard to see things clearly.
Exactly. Which is why it's so important to cultivate critical thinking skills.
Absolutely.
We need to be able to evaluate information, Discern fact from fiction, recognize when someone's trying to manipulate us.
It feels more important now than ever.
I agree. And speaking of challenging conversations, Harris doesn't shy away from tackling race and inequality in the book either.
It's a tough topic.
It is, but it's crucial to address. And his conversation with Glenn Loury, an economist and social commentator, is really insightful.
I like that conversation.
Yeah.
Loury has this nuanced perspective,
Yeah.
He acknowledges the historical injustices faced by minority communities.
Absolutely.
But also emphasizes individual agency and responsibility.
Yeah, it's a perspective that often gets lost in the polarized debates we hear about race.
Right.
He advocates for this balanced approach that recognizes both the systemic and individual factors at play.
It's a complex issue with no easy solutions.
Definitely.
But I think the main takeaway is that we need honest and open dialogues about these issues.
Yeah, even when they're uncomfortable.
Even when they're hard.
Yeah.
So let's shift gears now to something that's both exciting and a bit terrifying. The future of humanity.
The future. Oh, boy.
Are we talking existential threats?
Maybe.
Because I think about those a lot.
Yeah, we all do. Harris has a fascinating conversation about this with Max Tegmark.
Oh, Tegmark.
Who's a physicist and AI researcher.
Yeah, he's one of the leading voices in the conversation about existential risks.
Right.
Those threats that could potentially, wipe out humanity or at least permanently limit our potential.
We're talking things like nuclear war,
right.
climate change, pandemics, and even the unintended consequences of advanced technologies like AI.
That last one's particularly unsettling.
Given
all our earlier discussions about the potential for AI to surpass human intelligence.
Right. It's like a double-edged sword.
It really is.
Tegmark argues that we need to be proactive in addressing these risks. Right. We have to prioritize long-term thinking and global cooperation.
If we want to survive.
If we want to ensure a positive future for humanity.
It's a real call to action.
It is. It brings us back to that core theme of making sense.
Yeah.
Using reason and critical thinking to grapple with these really, really big challenges.
Okay. I think we've covered a lot of ground here in this part.
We have.
We've gone from the hidden biases in our own minds to the fragility of democracy, the complexities of race and inequality, and the potential for both progress and danger in the future.
We've been all over the map.
I feel like I've been on an intellectual roller coaster.
It's been a ride.
It has.
Yeah.
But I love how Harris weaves together all these seemingly disparate topics.
Yeah.
He shows how they're all interconnected.
Yeah.
And ultimately how they're relevant to our understanding of what it means to be human.
That's the through line.
It really is. Now, before we wrap things up, I want to circle back to this fascinating topic of consciousness.
Okay.
I know we touched on it earlier.
Yeah.
But there's so much more to explore.
There is. It's a bottomless well.
Harris had this really interesting conversation with Anil Seth.
Oh, Seth.
Who's doing some groundbreaking work in consciousness research.
Yeah, he's one of the leaders in the field.
And Seth challenges those traditional views of perception.
Okay.
He argues that our brains are essentially prediction machines.
Prediction machines. That's interesting.
So you're saying that our brains aren't just passively receiving information from the world.
Yeah.
But they're actively constructing our reality based on predictions.
Exactly. Our brains are constantly generating models of the world.
Wow.
Making predictions about what we're going to see, hear, feel, and then updating those models based on the sensory information we receive.
So we're not just observing reality, we're actively creating it.
In a way, yes.
Okay, now my brain is really doing backflips.
It's a mind-blowing concept.
It is. It makes you wonder how much of what we experience is actually real.
Yeah.
And how much is just our brains filling in the blanks.
Right. It's a question that's plagued philosophers for centuries.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I think the main point here is that our brains are incredibly complex.
They are.
And they're working constantly to make sense of the world in ways that we don't even realize.
It's both fascinating and a little bit unsettling.
It is. It makes you appreciate the power and the mystery of the human mind.
Absolutely. And it highlights the importance of really understanding how our brains work.
Especially as we develop all these powerful new technologies.
Right. Like AI.
Okay. I think we've covered a lot of ground in this part of our deep dive.
We have. We've explored everything from cognitive biases to the fragility of democracy, the complexities of race and inequality, and the urgent need to address those existential risks.
Right. And we've taken another dive into the mystery of consciousness.
That's right. It's been a whirlwind tour of some of the most important and challenging ideas facing humanity today.
And Just when I thought my brain was full. We're going to dive even deeper into consciousness in the next part.
We are.
I can't wait to see where this conversation takes us next. Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into making sense.
Yeah.
No, my brain is still buzzing from our last discussion.
Oh, yeah, about how our brains actually construct reality.
It's a wild concept, isn't it?
It really is. It makes you question everything you thought you knew.
It really does. And it leads us right into another fascinating conversation in the book about the nature of free will.
Oh, yeah, free will. That's a big one.
Do we really have control over our actions?
Right.
Or are we just, puppets on strings?
It's the age-old debate.
It really is. Philosophers have been arguing about this for centuries.
And now neuroscience is starting to weigh in on the conversation.
Exactly.
Right.
Harris has this really thought-provoking conversation with Robert Sapolsky.
Oh, Sapolsky, I love his work.
Yeah, he's a neuroscientist and a primatologist.
Mm-hmm.
And he basically argues that our sense of free will might be more of an illusion than we realize.
An illusion? So you're saying we don't actually have control?
Well, his research suggests that a lot of our behavior is influenced by things we're not even aware of.
Like what?
Like our genes,
Mm-hmm.
hormones,
Okay.
even subtle things in our environment.
Interesting.
He gives some pretty crazy examples in his research showing how just manipulating things like smell or the temperature of room
Really?
can actually change people's political and social attitudes.
Wait, so you're telling me that if I put someone in a room that smells like freshly baked cookies, they're going to more likely to donate to charity?
It sounds crazy, but that's what some studies are suggesting.
Wow. Our minds are way more malleable than we think.
Yeah. The point is, our moral intuitions are less fixed than we like to believe.
Right. They're susceptible to all these unconscious biases and environmental influences.
It's kind of unnerving to think about how much of our behavior might be driven by forces outside of our conscious control.
It is. It kind of makes you question the whole idea of personal responsibility.
Right.
Right.
But even if free will is an illusion, as Sapolsky suggests, it doesn't necessarily mean that we can't hold people accountable for their actions.
So we can still have a justice system even if our choices aren't truly free.
Exactly. We can design systems that encourage good behavior and discourage bad behavior.
Okay, that makes sense.
Even if we don't have ultimate control over our actions.
Interesting. So before we wrap things up, I want to touch on one more crucial theme that comes up a lot in making sense.
Okay.
And that's the importance of truth.
Truth, yeah.
And the dangers of ideology.
Yeah, that feels especially relevant these days.
It really does. We're living in this age of information overload.
Right.
Where it's so hard to tell what's true and what's not.
It's like we're drowning in information.
Exactly. And as we were talking about earlier, our brains are wired to take shortcuts, and fall prey to those biases, which makes us really vulnerable to misinformation and propaganda.
Yeah.
Harris argues that, this commitment to truth is absolutely essential for both individual well-being and the health of our society.
Without truth, we can't really function.
He warns against what he calls the tyranny of ideology, where we become so blindly attached to our belief systems that we lose sight of truth and reason.
It's about being willing to question our own beliefs.
Right.
To be open to evidence that challenges our views.
And to prioritize truth over our own comfort.
Which is hard.
It's very hard. But I think that's a perfect note to end on,
It is.
This whole idea of safeguarding truth, it requires vigilance, critical thinking, and this commitment to open dialogue.
Even when it's uncomfortable.
Even when it's really hard.
Yeah.
Well, it's been an incredible journey exploring the ideas in making sense with you.
It really has. We've covered so much ground, from the nature of consciousness to the future of humanity.
We've talked about everything.
And through it all, I think Sam Harris and his guests have really challenged us to think deeply about what it means to live a meaningful and ethical life.
Yeah, in a world that's full of complexity and uncertainty.
So to our listeners out there, keep those brains buzzing, keep questioning, keep exploring.
Yeah, keep searching for truth.
And keep making sense of the world around you. Until next time.